Wajahat was my maternal cousin. When my aunt passed away, he started living with his paternal uncle and aunt. At that time, he was a final year BA student, and I was preparing for my annual matriculation exams. One day, I told my mother that my English was weak and I needed tuition, or else I would fail. I asked her to arrange for a tutor. She replied, "My dear, where will I get the money for tuition? It will be difficult to find a teacher who would come to our house and help you prepare for the exam. Even if we do find one, they'll charge a lot, and your father will never allow you to go to an academy. What should we do then? Should you not take the exam?" I became frustrated and started crying. By chance, Wajahat arrived. Seeing me crying, he asked, "Aunt, what's wrong? Why is Sophia crying?" My mother explained the situation, saying it was an issue with English. She added, "This language of the Europeans has become a burden on us. There's no one at home to teach it, and the annual exams are approaching. She says if she doesn't get English tuition, she'll fail." Wajahat hesitated for a moment, then said, "Aunt, if you agree, I can teach Sophia for half an hour in the evening. My English is good." My mother thought for a while. It was free tuition, after all, and Wajahat was family. But the issue was that my parents had already decided that I would marry Wajahat, so allowing me to study with him could give relatives an opportunity to gossip. After some back and forth, my parents agreed to let Wajahat tutor me. His uncle's house wasn't far, and Wajahat started coming at 5 p.m. to teach me. He would teach me for about an hour. Within a few days, I had learned a lot, and I began to feel hopeful that I might pass the exam. We both knew that our elders wanted us to get married, even though the formal engagement ceremony hadn't taken place yet. However, the match was almost decided. Because of this, I felt a little shy around him. I was very reserved while studying, and he would speak hesitantly too. There was never a casual atmosphere between us. It was always a respectful teacher-student relationship where we only spoke when necessary. I kept my distance, not speaking to him unless needed, and he didn't say anything unnecessary either. We spent the hours studying in a pure and clean manner, and my mother was always nearby. When the environment was like this, thoughts remained clear. I knew I would marry Wajahat, and I didn't want to say anything that would lower my position in his eyes. Wajahat felt the same way. Our house was in a narrow alley, and one day after teaching me, Wajahat was about to leave when he bumped into a woman. The woman spoke up and said, "Whoever you are, you must be a relative of our neighbors, but your daily visits are causing me a lot of trouble." He was startled and asked, "Why, Aunt, have I done something wrong?" She replied, "You park your motorcycle in front of my door, and it blocks the way, causing inconvenience for me when I'm coming or going." Wajahat replied, "Aunt, this is only for a few days. After a week, you won't have this problem. Just bear with it for now. I can't park the motorcycle any farther. I fear it might be stolen." The woman then asked, "Who are you to them, and why do you come every day?" Through the conversation, she learned where Wajahat lived. He was an honest and straightforward young man, and he kept answering all her questions politely. The next day, Wajahat told my mother, "Your neighbor had an issue with me parking my motorcycle. She said it blocks her way." My mother reassured him, "Don't worry about it. New people have moved in, and they tend to make a fuss about little things. I'll talk to her myself." 2 days later, Aunt Rifat, one of Wajahat's paternal aunts, arrived at their house. Wajahat was surprised to see her because he didn't recognize her at first. She greeted him warmly, and he was even more surprised because he was always quite scared of his aunt. Wajahat's mother had passed away, so his paternal aunt had taken on the role of a guardian. She saw Wajahat talking casually with Aunt Rifat and asked, "Who is she, and why is she here?" Wajahat, out of fear, lied and said, "She's my friend's mother, and she's come to inquire about her son, who has been skipping college." Auntie Rifat stayed quiet, not denying Wajahat's lie, and thus the matter ended. However, Wajahat didn't understand why she had come there in the first place. When she was about to leave, she asked, "Son, can you get me a rickshaw? I can't stand here on the street for long." Wajahat accompanied her outside, and she said, "It's not that far. You can drop me home on your motorcycle. Afterward, come up for a minute and have some cold water." Reluctantly, Wajahat agreed and dropped her off at her house. He didn't want to enter, but Auntie Rifat insisted, and out of politeness, he went inside. She sat him down, brought him a drink, and then started talking. Son, my financial situation is not good. I have 3 daughters. One is married, but I still have to find suitable matches for the other 2. I'm a widow and looking for a match for my middle daughter. Wajahat was surprised and looked at her. She continued, Son, I find you very suitable, and I have seen your family. What better match could there be than you? Wajahat was taken aback by her casual approach. He was thankful that she didn't make any such remark in front of his aunt. Otherwise, she would have been furious. His aunt had a strict temperament and kept a close watch on her children. She disliked any kind of loose behavior. Wajahat quickly excused himself, saying, Aunt, this is not possible. My family is against marriage outside our relatives. They will never accept it. The next day when Wajahat was leaving after tutoring me, Auntie Rifat was waiting at the door. She said, Son, can you come inside for a minute? My main switch for the meter isn't working, and the food will spoil if I don't turn it on. Without asking any more questions, Wajahat reluctantly followed her inside. Her 2 daughters were standing there, looking quite beautiful and well-dressed. They greeted him, and although Wajahat didn't want to engage with them, the girls were quick and gathered around him. One of them engaged him in conversation, while the other went to bring tea. Wajahat, although uncomfortable, didn't want to refuse their hospitality. He drank the tea with discomfort, feeling like he had just consumed poison. He decided that after this incident, he would never step inside that house again, as he could sense Auntie Rifat's intentions. Wajahat usually went to the nearby park after tutoring me, wearing his walking joggers, and would either sit there for a while or take a walk. It seemed Auntie Rifat had learned about this routine. The next day after tutoring me, Wajahat went to the park and found Auntie Rifat and her daughter sitting there. They approached him and started talking casually, as if they had known him for years. Wajahat tried to keep his distance, answering their questions with minimal response. After a while, he finally said, Aunt, our family is different. I'm already engaged, so marriage outside the family is not an option. You should look for a match for your daughter elsewhere. He expected that Auntie Rifat would give up after his clear statement, but she wasn't someone who would easily be deterred. The next day, when Wajahat was about to start tutoring, Auntie Rifat's daughter, Mashal, came to see me. She said, Baji, Sophia, Mom has a high fever and needs medicine. Could you please send Wajahat to get it for us? I was surprised by Mashal's appearance. Her mother was ill, yet she was perfectly dressed and put together. When Mashal looked at me questioningly, I replied, Wajahat, go. It's a good deed to help someone who is sick. Auntie Rifat has no son and is a widow. She must have asked you out of necessity, not because she wanted to. Reluctantly, Wajahat went to their house to help Mashal's mother. But when he arrived at her house, he found that her mother was perfectly fine and wasn't sick at all. It was all a ruse to get him to visit. As soon as he entered, the girls were all smiles and started showering him with attention. In the end, Wajahat, being a young and naive boy, fell into their trap and became interested in their daughter, Mashal, who was exceptionally beautiful and around 16 or 17 years old. My exams were over and I had stopped going to school, staying home instead. But Wajahat still continued to visit our street. He would avoid our house and go directly to Auntie Rafaat's. He would park his motorbike in a friend's garage in another street and walk to her house to keep his visits discreet. Soon, he also started skipping college, and his interest in studying faded. He avoided our house completely, and we all noticed that something was off. Occasionally, when my father or brother passed by and saw him, he would stop for a couple of minutes, but mostly he would avoid them. My aunt also noticed that Wajahat's behavior had changed, but she couldn't figure out the reason. He often asked my uncle for money, but when questioned, he would give excuses. Eventually, my uncle suggested that it would be better for Wajahat to find something productive to do instead of wasting time. Wajahat agreed, and half of his day was spent at a shop. By 2 p.m., he would return home, and after that, he would head straight to Auntie Rafat's house. He even took them shopping with money he had stolen from the shop. No one realized this in the beginning. Auntie Rafat's financial situation was unstable, and she had to pay rent for the house. She was looking for someone to help her, and Wajahat, the naive and gullible boy, fit the bill perfectly. It wasn't long before we found out that Wajahat was helping Auntie Rifa and her daughters financially. At that time, I didn't understand the true purpose of his visits, but my mother started to feel suspicious. One day, she decided to go to Auntie Rafat's house while Wajahat was there. She scolded him, saying, "What are you doing here in a house where there's no man? Why have you stopped coming to our house?" Then she turned to Auntie Rifat and said, "Don't misunderstand. This boy is my future son-in-law and my nephew. His engagement was fixed with my daughter when they were children, so no other man is going to be involved with him." She grabbed Wajahat's hand and pulled him out of the house. Once we were back home, she gave him a warning. "Don't ever go to your neighbor's house again. If you do, I'll tell your uncle and aunt, and I'll set things right. You don't know the kind of people they are. As long as you have money, they'll be your friends. But once you don't, they won't even remember you." Wajahat silently listened to my mother's lecture, then left the house. Mashal sent him a message saying, "If you don't come, I'll die from poison. Tell me, how will our wedding happen now?" Wajahat was completely trapped in their scheme. Later, he told Auntie Rifat, "If you end my engagement, I'll marry your daughter." Auntie Rifat suggested, "You should go to Dubai. Once you start earning there, you'll be able to rebel against your family. Send me your daughter's visa, and I'll make sure she marries you. Don't worry about what your family thinks. You're the one who has to marry, not them." Wajahat thought that if he couldn't marry Mashal while staying here, then his only option was to go to Dubai. He knew how to drive and had a driving license, so he stole money from my uncle's shop and arranged for a visa through a friend. He left for Dubai. Only 8 months had passed when Auntie Rifat started sending him letters, urging him to return soon as the wedding date needed to be fixed. Wajahat replied saying, "I'll stay here a little longer to settle things, and then we'll get married." Soon after, Mashal's letter started arriving saying, "I'm so ill from missing you. I'm on the brink of death. Please come back quickly." Wajahat resigned from his job and in desperation returned. When he reached Mashal's house, he found that she wasn't sick at all. She told him, "Without you, I can't live. I start feeling like I'm dying. I don't know what to do. My heart just can't rest." Wajahat felt guilty for leaving his job, realizing the loss he had incurred by returning, and now his family was pressuring him to marry and settle down. Otherwise, they would not let him go to Dubai. In his distress, he confided in Aunt Rafat, saying, "Now my uncle and aunt are forcing me to marry Sophia, and I can't refuse them because I don't have my own parents and I live with my uncle and aunt. I didn't want to come here, but now I'm stuck. What should I do?" Aunt Rifat assured him, "Don't worry, I will take care of this. I have connections with a police inspector. I will arrange for a raid at your uncle's shop, and they will be arrested." As planned, Aunt Rifat managed to plant a pistol at the shop, and the police raided it. Wajahat's uncle was arrested, and the wedding was called off amidst the scandal. The neighbors started spreading rumors that drugs were being sold at the shop, and some even claimed that smuggling materials were being trafficked. This brought immense shame to Wajahat's family, especially to his aging uncle and aunt. When Wajahat learned from Aunt Rifat that she had orchestrated the raid, he became furious, but deep down he was secretly relieved. At least the wedding was postponed. However, he still didn't understand that his family's reputation had been tarnished, and his own sense of shame had diminished under Aunt Rafiat's influence. After 2 years of working in Dubai, sending money to Aunt Rifat for her daughter's dowries and rent, Wajahat called her, asking if everything was ready for his return and marriage to Mashal. But Aunt Rafat's response was vague, and Mashal stopped replying to his letters. When Wajahat couldn't take it anymore, he called a friend and asked him to find out what was going on. The friend reported back, saying that Mashal had already married someone else, and that Wajahat had been deceived all along. Shocked, Wajahat went to meet Mashal's older sister, who had already been married. She was blunt with him, saying, "So, forget Mashal, she's married now. You were foolish to leave everything for her. You didn't even think that 2 years is a long time, and someone else could have come along in your place." Hearing this, Wajahat realized that he had been manipulated by Aunt Rifat and Mashal. He understood that Aunt Rifat had used him to get what she wanted, and now she was ready to use someone else. He returned home dejected and defeated. When he arrived, his mother, who had been furious with him, scolded him bitterly, saying, What brings you back now? You've lost the one person who was by your side, and now you come to us asking for refuge? You've caused enough trouble for the family already. His friend Wahid had told her everything, and now she was deeply disappointed in him. Wajahat, filled with regret, apologized to his mother, and after a long, emotional conversation, she finally forgave him. His uncle and aunt also visited, pleading with his parents to allow Wajahat to marry Sophia, reminding them that the marriage had been arranged when they were children. They were desperate to keep the alliance and restore peace in the family. Wajahat's parents finally relented, and after much persuasion, the engagement with Sophia was reinstated. Though the events were painful, Wajahat had learned valuable lessons from his mistakes. Over the years, Wajahat and I married, and we have lived a happy life together. He now takes great care of me and treats me with love and respect. His past experiences have taught him valuable lessons, and he has redirected his life in a positive direction. However, whenever Aunt Rifa'at or her daughters are mentioned, Wajahat is always filled with regret, knowing how he had been misled by them.